Well, Toby asks, I was wondering if you could talk about your systems for introducing and coaching plyometrics, developing speed, and energy systems for athletes. Well, it's not going to be very complex because I work with mostly power athletes, but I want to kind of go through a couple things. Years ago, we taught a system to, and I believe the guy was named McNair. He came to Utah, he did a workshop, and he taught us a very good system for teaching athletes to improve their sprint mechanics. And I remember being at a thing one time, and Greg Shepard at Bigger, Faster, Stronger had this guy. And Greg showed him these mechanics, and the guy goes, in Soviet Russia, we teach that when they are 5 years old. And that's the first time I realized just how full of crap most people are. Many athletes will come to you when you're coaching with very poor sprint mechanics. There's a whole sport that teaches horrible sprinting, and that sport is sometimes called soccer, or in Europe it's called football. But you'll get these young ladies who come out for track and they run like this, and it's terrible. So you do need to work on the basics. It is well worth your time to teach your children the basics of appropriate sprint technique. But that's got a load limit. You're not going to get a kid who runs a 5.440 to run a 4.440 just by, teaching them to pull and lock or, do something with their legs or anything. A big issue when we're coaching young sprinters, and we actually in the weight room can work on this with the suitcase carry, is there's a real tendency for them to have a wobbling head, which leads to a wobbling body. And so one of the things I try to do, and at the track it's easy because you have lines, is when you teach a kid to run on the line, it's just a drill. But the idea is that to run on the line, when the right foot is grounded, the head is over the right foot. When the left foot is grounded, the head is over the left foot. And it teaches them that ability to stay smooth in the lane. So I would spend more time on mechanics with a younger athlete. But the truth is, if somebody shows up and this is what they need in their, 27, this is what they need, and you have to work on it. I think as a strength coach, and this comes, there's nothing new about this. I think there's some ways we can to get an athlete faster. It's not going to shock anybody. It's going to be the Olympic lifts, snatch and clean and jerk, power cleans probably, power snatches probably. In the kettlebell world, if you do it correctly, I think kettlebell swings can help. Not so much the power from the glute, but that weird kind of hinge flexibility that you get from doing kettlebell swings. I am going to nod and tell you that I think two people are much smarter than I am to go over this, and that's, of course, Barry Ross. And Barry recommended deadlifts and bench press, and that's it. Get somebody really, really strong in the deadlift. He always had his athletes drop the bar. He never wanted the eccentrics. He didn't want them to get sore. And he believed they needed some kind of upper body strength, and so he just picked the bench press because that's what he picked. Charlie Francis, the great Canadian coach, didn't care what you did in the weight room as long as you didn't change things up. His big fear, and this is fascinating, was he never wanted his sprinters to be sore. So if you decided you're going to do half squat, lat pull down, and machine bench press, well, those are your exercises. Just don't switch them. Really a different view. You have some things down here. First off, plyometrics. I was there when plyometrics were the first, were the answer to all questions. The word plyometrics, of course, as everyone knows, probably no one, is a term invented by Fred Wilt, who was the editor of Track Technique, who also loved to throw the hammer on his own all the time. I guess he wasn't very good. He loved the feel of the hammer throw. So Fred Wilt came up with this word. There's nothing new about it. I've got stuff from the early 1960s from both the Germans and the Soviets doing these kinds of things. But it was when Pat Masdorf broke the world record. He's probably one of the last 4 or 5 people to break the world record in the high jump using a straddle technique versus the Fosbury. And he did something he coined depth jumping, and that's where you step off a table and bounce back up on it. Step it off, bounce back up. And of course, whenever somebody breaks the world record in track, You laugh about what they do until they break the world record, and then that becomes the gospel. That's the only thing you can do. You got to be very careful with plyometrics. I remember being at a school. I don't want to mention Judge Memorial's name, but I was at a school where we had a new track coach who just basically said, plyometrics, that's all the kids need, plyometrics. Well, the research doesn't agree with that. The Germans who did a lot of research on plyo said you needed a double body weight squat before you get any use out of plyos. Well, the number of athletes you're going to work with in high school who can double body weight squat is going to be low, but those who do are going to be pretty damn good. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this. Foundationally, start there with proper technique. Get reasonably strong in like the deadlift. I would say you probably have to sneak up on a double body weight deadlift for everybody. And then you can start looking at some other things. The best way I know how to develop speed, once you've done the sprint mechanics work, the strength work, is competition. When Charlie Francis was talking here in Utah, up in Ogden, it was brilliant talk. I think it was the last workshop he ever did before he died. He said something that really lit my mind up. He said, one of the problems with American collegiate sprinters is that when they finally go into the open competitions, all they do is train and race. And I thought, I'm sitting here going, well, yeah, that's track and field, isn't it? He goes, what they were doing in college, though, is they would go to the Texas relays, and someone would hand them the baton in the 4x200 race, and someone else would be ahead of them. So they had to practice trying to pass people, which, of course, is working on speed. The best way I know to increase speed is to race people and to have a variety of ways of racing people. When you're a high school football coach, and I don't agree with this, but a lot of them do it, you'll be doing wind sprints, and you'll say, whoever finishes first can go in, you're done for the day. Well, those guys who've been kind of just being lazy the entire time will all of a sudden race and win their heat so they can go in early. Racing is the best way to increase speed. And you can do it by having your athlete run the 4x1, the 4x2, invent races. We at Southwood Junior High, our coaches were masters in getting people to run laps by having them race. Practice was just a series of races. When you talk about energy systems, you're outside of my area. But I know this. For me, I'm always going to go back to the classic methods of track and field, no matter what events you do. We're going to have an off season where we're going to work on your weaknesses and expanding your base. There's going to be a pre-season where we start to cut things down and increase the intensity. And then, of course, we're going to have the season where it's all about when the gun goes off or the official calls your name. The East Germans had a great way to explain this: accumulation, intensification, and transformation. I don't know the energy systems involved, because the only thing I care about as a track coach is, well, first off, did they improve their personal best? That's number one. And then number two, of course, did you win? To be honest, I have to kind of be honest with you, Toby. I think winning is more important, but that's just me. I hope that helped.